The point of this PowerPoint is to give you an idea about how Americans reacted to environmental change in the period of the Market Revolution. It concerns the Hudson Valley School of Painters and the founder of that school, Thomas Cole, and in particular, a group of paintings called the Course of Empire series that Cole did. So here's an example, Martin Heed's thunderstorm in Narragansett Bay. We'll have occasion to come back to Martin Heed. The Hudson School prided themselves, and it lasted through much of the century, into the last quarter of the 19th century, although it began in the period that we're studying now. They prided themselves on the realistic dimensions of their paintings, really tried to paint nature as they found it. If you see these paintings close up, if you look very closely, it's almost impossible even to see the brushstrokes in the paintings. They wanted to eliminate any evidence of a subjective interpretation of nature and almost give a photographic before photography, a photographic image of the natural world. They were also trying to capture the sublime nature of the sublime quality of the natural world, to see God and the majesty of God and the awesomeness of his creation, to try to invoke a spiritual and religious feeling. So these paintings are all taken of various areas of New England, and in particular of the Hudson River Valley area, stretching up from New York City up to Albany. So I'm just trying to give you a sense of these images here, putting a bunch of them in front of you. Some of them are identified by title and some are not. So here's a storm in the valley. You can see really tried to emphasize the majesty of the natural world, often depicting storms, but then also depicting these more pastoral scenes of calmness and harmony, oneness with nature. So at this time, the Hudson River Valley had become a center of tourism, and Europeans almost always came to the area. New York City, residents of New York City and other places in the United States also often came to the Hudson River Valley to enjoy the splendors. This is actually a painting done in honor of Thomas Cole. It's called Kindred Spirits, showing this editor and poet William Cullen Bryant and Cole himself sharing a moment with the Tattersall Falls in the background, famous tourist site, which again we'll have occasion to revisit. Hustings on Hastings. Reminiscences of the Catskill Mountains. So hopefully you're getting an idea of what these paintings are like. Catskill, that's the name of the mountains here up the Hudson River from New York City, the Catskill Cove. I'm not sure of the title of that one. So what's interesting about this is that actually the Hudson River Valley, stretching up to Albany, had become one of the most industrialized landscapes in all of the United States. The Market Revolution was going full blast here in the Hudson River Valley. So of course you don't see it in these images, do you? Right? But this is one of the most industrialized landscapes in the United States. It was particularly a center of tanning, the tanning of skins, animal skins, particularly awful industry that creates tremendous pollution and bad smells and so on. It was also a center of lumbering. The forests of the upper Hudson River, no matter how you saw them in the paintings, have been clear-cut at least once, and in many cases several times over, by the 1830s and the 1840s. The area was also a center of brick making. So you think about New York City. New York City is built on the lumber and the bricks and the stone and the quarries of this Hudson River Valley. There's an interesting website here, Hudson Valley Ruins, by this guy, Rob Yasiniak. He's done really interesting work here. So that's on the bottom is a brickyard, and the top is obviously a tannery, leatherworking. This is unidentified. I don't know where it's from. It may or may not be from the Hudson River Valley, but it gives you a sense of the ugly industrial, intimidating, awesome in their own way, industrial landscapes that did not appear in the Hudson River Valley painters. So one more. This is more recent pollution here on the Hudson River. Perhaps you know that the Hudson is notorious for its PBC, do I have that right? PCBs, pollutions from the General Electric plant, and a multi-billion-dollar cleanup that is maybe underway, maybe not really so much underway. So come back to Martin Heed. So again, no indication here of an industrialized landscape whatsoever. It's more pastoral. Well, about 35 years ago, someone found this Martin Heed painting in an attic somewhere. And it was then titled, I don't think it was given a title by Heed himself, but it was titled A Gremlin in the Studio. And I don't know if you can see this little crazy stick figure here at the bottom. So the painting, a classic Hudson River School painting, is up on an easel, but that effort to efface any evidence of a subjective artist interpreting the natural landscape has been lost, because you've got this crazy little gremlin here winking at you, and the painting is up on an easel, by the way, of sawn logs. So remember that lumbering was a crucial part of this industrial landscape. So he seems to be saying, don't really believe exactly what you're seeing. It's a more interesting and more complex story going on. So Michael Hyman has written this interesting essay called Production Confronts Consumption, about how Americans in this period first began to separate the benefits, the joys, the allures of industrial consumption, the modes of consumption that industrial production makes possible, to separate that, segregate that from the disagreeable aspects of industrial production, right? So here's Hyman. Veiling the disagreeable facts of production in this celebrated landscape required a careful sleight of hand. In supplying a market demand for paintings of a romantic wilderness, the Hudson River School of Painters overlooked or screened out with vegetation the burnt over fields, stinking tanneries, polluted streams, clamorous sawmills, and other production intrusions. So then he goes on and tells this really amazing story about the Tattersall Falls, one of the big tourist attractions in the area. So harried visitors from the metropolis often came to the Hudson Valley to escape the riots, congestion, heat, malaria, yellow fever, and other environmental and social discomforts of the city and of industrial production. But after viewing one barroom come natural wonder, one jaded visitor revealed, in fact, if your romantic nerves can stand the steady truth, the Catskill Fall is turned on to accommodate poets and parties of pleasure. That is, after selling you a drink, the barroom proprietor literally turned on the waterfall. This is ludicrous, the visitor concluded, but most of us are really only shopkeepers, and natural spectacles are but shop windows on a grand scale. So I'm not, on the right is a modern picture of the falls. On the left, I told you this famous painting, Kindred Spirits. I'm not exactly sure how the waterfall was turned on, but perhaps this was in the dry season where you had to back up the water to create a spectacular enough scene. But the point is that the natural beauty was an effect, had to be manipulated, had to be provided by human, well, in this case, human chicanery. So, and what I'm trying to get you to think about here is, well, how are Americans dealing with environmental change? Are they just turning their backs on it and pretending like it's not happening? Are they just whistling in the dark, hoping for the best? Or are they facing up to it and trying to deal with the costs of environmental change? And I'm afraid it's the former that seems to be the case. But then I want to show you this series of paintings by Thomas Cole. There's a photograph of him by Matthew Brady. A famous set of gigantic canvases. I think they're in the New York City Historical Society. I've seen them somewhere in New York City. Gigantic paintings about that cover an entire wall on the side of the room, called The Course of Empire, painted between 1833 and 1836, 5 grand canvases, titled, and I'm going from the upper left clockwise, Savage, Pastoral, actually I'm going left, right, and then bottom left, Consummation, and then bottom right, Destruction, and in the middle, Desolation. So Cole seems to have some sense that all is not well in the United States, that we've clearly passed the savage stage, and maybe we're in that magical moment of the pastoral stage. But Cole, who had his real doubts about cities and the value of cities, saw us moving towards a consummation of a grand and perhaps somewhat decadent civilization, and then anticipated inevitably the destruction of that civilization, and then finally the return to desolation, essentially return to savagery. So you can see a circular conception of history rather than a progressive, ever upward conception of history, maybe in part driven by his own misgivings about the direction of American society. So then, just to bring home the point, I'm just going to juxtapose some images of actual industrial landscapes with the Hudson River paintings. And in some cases, I think in most of these cases where the images are no longer from the Hudson River Valley, but I think most of them are taken actually from William Cronin's wonderful book called Nature's Metropolis, which is really about how Chicago grew to its great size by exploiting and maybe to some extent destroying various ecosystems. So I'll just go through these quickly. The lumber yard. So this was a huge log jam on one of the rivers heading down to Lake Michigan that fed the lumber yards then of Chicago. Again, Chicago's lumber yard. Very pastoral scene, though, although this is a famous one that is on the cover of Leo Marx's The Machine and the Garden, fascinating book about Americans wanting to have it all, to have it both ways, the pastoral landscape and the industrial technology. This is, can't think of the painter's name offhand, but the effort to say we can have industrial technology, the train in the middle of the landscape there, and yet still have this wonderful pastoral scene. So here's the decimation of the buffalo. Again, these are taken from Chicago. But the whole point is just to juxtapose the industrial landscapes with these. They're not imaginary landscapes. I mean, you could find this sort of beauty, but it's kind of a willful ignorance of the true state of the Hudson River Valley. So here's the meatpacking industry in Chicago, and the transformation of the prairies, a complete transformation of an ecosystem in the Great West from prairie to amber waves of grain. And the last point here is, this is one last image, I think, from Cronin. Cronin is saying, well, our resorts, our country towns, our resorts, and maybe even our suburbs, we somehow think as natural. And he points out, no, they are part of the industrializing society as well. We create these enchanted summer lands, as this railroad ad has it. We create them as retreats from the stress and strain and disagreeable aspects of our industrial civilization. So this is no more natural than the sawmills and the tanneries and so on. It just serves a different purpose. And so Andrew Jackson Downing, a landscape architect and really one of the architects of modern American suburbia, also came of age in the Hudson River Valley and did some of his most important work there. This is the Springside Estate in Poughkeepsie, New York, right on the Hudson River. So I think that what you're seeing here is us wanting our cake and eat it too, is something that is still with us, has still relevance for us today. Do we just want the fruits of our environmental transformation of the world, or are we willing to take responsibility for all sides of it? Thank you.